canceled my train between Amtrak canceled my train between LA and Seattle, so I'm still in Flagstaff. But I am going to go to Seattle by plane tomorrow.
Oh, you should have used Southwest.
Right. I'm flying up, but I'm not flying on Southwest.
Looking for my, there we go. Sorry. All right, so are there any new board members that we need to welcome to the committee?
Yes, if I could, Chair Vasquez, I would like to just announce and welcome Councilmember Miranda Sweet, who is our newest board member. I really appreciate your volunteering to join the rest of the elected officials. Councilmember Sweet, we had a meeting a few weeks ago. We actually met a couple of years ago and introduced Metro Plan. And I appreciate how much enthusiasm you've expressed about joining the board and looking forward to working with you here going forward.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And if I could, Chair Vasquez, I'd like to also use this opportunity to introduce Sandra Tavel, who is our newest transportation planner, who started on December 12th of last year. So just less than a month. And Sandra comes to us from New York as well as San Francisco and has a lot of experience with grants and planning. So we're very glad to have Sandra on the team.
Welcome, glad you're on the team. And welcome
Thank you.
Miranda as well.
Vice Chair
Okay.
Vasquez, if I
Yes.
may, Miles, I noticed that Mayor Daggett was mentioned on the roll call. I'm not sure if that's necessary going forward, unless she's an alternate and you put alternates on the roll call as well. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure, Chair Vasquez, Councilmember Aslan. Mayor Daggett emailed me and said she may attend today. So I definitely appreciate what you're saying in terms of protocol. I thought she might be here, and since it's a Zoom meeting and we couldn't actually see everybody at once, just thought it would be best to do the introduction.
Sounds good. So now, is there anything else before we go to call to the public? Okay, so in that case, we'll go to call to the public. If there's anybody that has public comment that they would like to present to Metro Plan, please do so now.
And Mr. Chairman, we haven't been notified of anyone, so I don't believe we have any members of the public who want to speak.
Okay, thank you. The next, we need to discuss the minutes of the regular meeting from December 1st. Is there any discussion about the minutes? No, in that case, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Jim McCarthy. I move to approve the minutes as written.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
I'm a yes.
Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to the consent agenda. Don't see anything on this agenda that has any consent agenda. Is that correct, Miles, or I missed something?
That's correct. There is nothing on the consent agenda.
Okay, in that case, then we'll move forward to general business, federal and state funding update from Metro Plan staff, Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to jump to a PowerPoint presentation. So if you'll just give me a minute here to set it up. Okay, you should all see the bipartisan infrastructure law update, a director's task force request. This PowerPoint presentation corresponds pretty much with the staff report that's in your packet. I put it into this format to give you updates, just to make it a little more user-friendly. And the first thing I'm going to start with is a director's task force, and I've got quite a bit of news here. But actually, before I start with that, since we have at least one new board member and it's the first meeting of the year, I wanted to go ahead and put up the Metro Plan workflow because, you know, we're a somewhat arcane organization in some ways. So just a reminder on how information and decisions and projects get filtered through Metro Plan. The first bullet up here on what to expect says, just reminder, executive board meets at least quarterly, usually 8 times a year. Our technical advisory committee, technical staff people like Paul Mood, city engineer, who's at this meeting, and other technical staff from other Metro Plan member agencies, they meet before the board meeting so that they can review pertinent items. And then the management committee, which consists of city and county manager's office, any president's office, Nate, general manager, they also meet before the board meeting. And I think I mentioned Andy Bertelson is here. He serves on the management committee for the county. In any case, the little diagram on the right says, you know, there's inputs from staff. Staff reports go to the technical advisory committee and we take feedback. They go to the management committee, we take feedback, and then they come, like they are today, to the executive board, and we get direction as staff from all of you. And with that as just a bit of background, I will jump into some key points on the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I know this will be reminders for most of you, but it's also some new information perhaps for some. So I just want to go through it to frame the issues. First of all, the bipartisan infrastructure law increased funds to the state by over $137 million in just 1 year, in fiscal year 2022. And there's this pot of money known as Surface Transportation Block Grant Funds, STBG. They've gone to ADOT, and over the past 10 years, those funds have increased by $40 million. And as it happens, small metropolitan planning organizations like Metro Plan and councils of government like NACOG up here in our region, their pass-through of surface transportation block grant funding has been flat for over 10 years. So a group of directors, as a task force, including the directors of Maricopa Association of Governments and Pima Association of Governments, got together to make a joint request to the state to basically ask for some additional funding and ask that $4.4 million increase be given to small COGs and MPOs. And one thing I want to point out about this approach, and I really want to recognize Maricopa Association of Governments, MAG, and Pima Association of Governments, PAG, you know, in the Phoenix and Tucson areas, they actually said, look, we know that we will not get any additional money from this request. However, we've had increases every year for the past 10 years. You small COGs and MPOs have not. So we, as you know, your big siblings, are going to stand behind you in this request and ask for additional funding to be passed through to you. So that was a great outcome of the partnership. And it's been a long process, and there's quite a bit to share that's happened, not only in the past month, but just today. So I'm going to show some graphs here just to illustrate some of the bullet points that I made. You can see the blue graph, which talks about the fiscal year 21 appropriation. The red bar, talks about the 22 appropriation. And then the green bar is the difference And just in 1 year, the state funding went up by 17 million. I'm sorry, the state funding went up by 10 million, and MAG and PAG both got increases, but small MPOs and COGs received nothing. And the next graph is busier, but I'll just tell you the point here is over the last 10 years, the state share has gone up by 40 million, but small COGs and MPOs has gone up 0. So essentially, in presenting these numbers, we wanted to take it to ADOT and make this case and ask for some additional funding. So a letter went out, which has been shared with this group in the past. I just put the header of the letter up on the screen to show that it's to Director John Halakowski, the director of ADOT. We basically go through the points in the letter that I just made to you. And just pointing out that it's signed by people from around the state, including Phoenix and Tucson. And we sent that letter to Director Halakowski, and we had 2 meetings with Director Halakowski since, actually 3, but 2 of them happened, one in November and one in December. And we laid out our issues and we made the request. And first thing that ADOT said was, we understand why you want this money. Surface transportation block grant money is very flexible, and we understand why you want it, because you can use it for any purpose. Which is exactly why it's very hard for us to give to you, because we have a lot of needs and we have purposes to use it for. So I appreciated their candor and the team that was assembled to talk through this together. But ultimately, they said they try to come up with another solution. So we met in December and talked about another solution. And then we had a meeting today at 11 o'clock where ADOT shared this solution. And basically what ADOT said is, we cannot and are not prepared to give you an additional 4.4 million of this surface transportation block grant funds. It's just not available. However, we can give you an additional 5.5 million. Actually, I'm sorry, it's 5.25 million. This is a typo. But 5.25 million of bridge funds, which is basically another pot of money. It's a different color of money. And they could give us actually more than we asked for in a different pot of money and focus it on greater Arizona. So that's what was shared today. And there was discussion with all of my peers, 10 of us, the small COGs and MPOs from around the state, and the folks from ADOT. And the program was presented, and essentially what happened, and I'm talking just an hour and a half ago, essentially what happened is there were some members who were very happy with it because they saw that a lot of their needs could be met, and there were some who were not so happy with it. And I'm going to try to use a metaphor here, okay, to illustrate this. In some ways, it's as though we went to ADOT and said, look, we need money to run our households. So give us some additional money because our housing costs, everything's gone up. Give us some additional money to run our households generally. And this is a metaphor, right? ADOT came back and said, we can't do that, but we can give you money for snow removal. And that's great if people get a lot of snow. But there are some communities that don't get any metaphorical snow, which means they can't use the money. They really have no use for it. And I'm probably not the best metaphor because it does snow in Flagstaff, and I apologize if I'm making this more confusing rather than less. But it does, what does occur is that Flagstaff, we don't have any projects that we know of that we can use this bridge funding for. So although the 5.5 million additional will go to the state and is a good thing, it doesn't necessarily help MetroPlan. So there are other people like MetroPlan, small urban areas who feel the same way. And I put on this slide next steps because basically the discussion continues. On one hand, it's a victory to get an additional 5.5 million to greater Arizona. On the other hand, it's not much of a victory for MetroPlan when none of the money is really able to come to us for our projects. So that's the first of the grants I wanted to share today. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just pause and see if there are questions and comments before I go on to the next one.
Are there any questions or comments? Well, I was just doing some calculations while I was looking at there, and I'm not sure how many of the rural counties are, if it's 8 or if it's 12, but just based on that, if you divide 5.5 million, it's not a lot per county. And it's, between 350 and 550 per 500,000 per county. And I think that's considering the costs of different projects, you're right, it isn't much. My question is, are there not any bridge projects in our area for MetroPlan that we could consider if this money is available?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's possible our first look at this is that there aren't any that are really eligible, because it also has to be bridges that are fair and poor, or in fair or poor condition. And they have to be off-system bridges, so meaning not ADOT bridges. So it gets pretty arcane, but it looks like the immediate answer is no to your question. I don't know that there are any bridges we can use it on. However, I want to point out that Dave Wessel here, Transportation Planning Manager, is giving me a note that says, raises the question, can we perhaps swap funds? Is there a way that we can still work this? And my answer to that is it's not over yet. We just had the introductory meeting today, and we're going to go back and continue to work it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, well,
Okay,
thank you
I'll
for
go-
the update.
I'll go to the next slide if I can. These next couple of updates are much briefer. In terms of a smart fund, this is really just a reminder, the state has created a funding source, $50 million that can be used to match federal grants. It's competitive. The process is still being developed. But essentially, if MetroPlan applies, say for $1 million grant, federal, we can ask the state to provide 200,000 of their funds from the smart fund to be able to draw that down. So it is a good thing, and more news to come on that as it unfolds in the future. And then the next item is, this is an update as much as anything. It's pretty brief, but there is a lot happening. So I am calling this Southwest Flagstaff Infrastructure Development. And essentially this speaks to Beulah widening and the J.W. Powell Bridge at I-17. And for the past, in particular, 4 to 6 weeks, we have been collaborating with Northern Arizona Healthcare in an effort to pursue $9 million to widen the bridge at John Wesley Powell Bridge at I-17. And you'll see later in this presentation about a $5 million grant that we are pursuing for that. And Dave Wessel is working on making the case to ADOT to make the project more competitive so that they see the need. So that's one part of this work, is to find additional funds to widen the J.W. Powell Bridge. The other part is Beulah widening. And this is the reason Northern Arizona Healthcare is particularly interested. And it's possible that we will submit a RAISE grant. And Dave, do you know what RAISE stands for? It's an acronym for a funding source. The I is for infrastructure. So essentially it is an infrastructure grant at the federal level. There's a $25 million limit. And it might be that MetroPlan submits this grant. And I know that Paul Mood is in the room, and I just want to share with the board that I'm meeting with Paul and some other members of the city's team next week. Because if Metro Plan submits this grant, it raises some questions about construction and administration. Because primarily we are Metro Plan, we're not Metro Build, right? We're a planning organization. So if we write a grant and receive it, does that mean Metro Plan becomes a construction agency to build it? Or does it mean that Metro Plan passes it through to the city? And essentially, if Metro Plan is gonna pass it through to the city, maybe it makes more sense for the city to apply directly without having Metro Plan as a layer in between. There is a tight deadline on this grant. It's due February 28th. So we're gonna be discussing it next week and hope we can figure all these things out and do what makes the most sense and still apply within this cycle. And I'll pause there again and see if there's any questions or comments.
Yeah, I have some questions. I'm going to zero in on the John Wesley Powell Bridge for a moment. I really appreciate all the efforts going on here and the recognition that that widening should happen all at once, and it should include bike ped. I don't know how much of that conversation is focused on a dedicated bike ped pathway. It was just yesterday, I think, I was driving on the 4th Street Bridge, and there were lots of children on either side of that bridge walking along the dedicated pathway. And it was just a really nice illustration to me how important it was that we won that extra laneage there, for lack of a better term, especially right next to a school. But if we're going to fight for this widening, I would think that we should fight for the dedicated aspect of the bike ped lanes. It's just really important to do, especially if we're thinking in terms of 30 years out, when John Wesley Powell is connected over past South Lake Mary. That pedestrian bicycle infrastructure and the dedicated aspect of it are going to be really important future amenities. I also have some questions about beautification and what we can do to make sure that that's for lack of a better phrasing, a beautiful gateway to town. It's really sort of the moment when you enter Flagstaff, and it'd be great if it was highly decorative and inviting as people pass north on I-17 towards the city. Any thoughts on those things?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Aslan, I'll say a few things, and then Dave Wessel may have some more to share. I hear your points of making sure that it is bicycle and pedestrian friendly and dedicated to those areas, dedicated to those purposes. Since we're working on the design at this point and just making the case for the design, I feel like there's plenty of room to be optimistic that that's what we can, pursue. And then similarly, in terms of beautification, so it feels like there's an entryway, a gateway to Flagstaff. I think there's opportunity for that as well. And with that, Dave, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Miles. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Aslan. In our discussions to date with ADOT, we have been using the 4th Street Bridge as the model, if you will, for what we'd like to see.
Great.
Particularly the pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And at least in what we presented to them for cost, it's included those additional facilities. As far as beautification, my recollection, and I'll double check on this and get back to you, is that when the city partnered with ADOT on the 4th Street Bridge, those beautification elements were costs assigned to the city of Flagstaff. So as we pursue funds for this, we'll keep that in mind.
Great. Well, thank you. I just want to keep beating this drum, make sure, just adding to the mix in terms of the voices and the noise out there. that we should go as far as we can with this, including the beautification aspects. I've never been very impressed with the little pine cones that were drawn on the outside of the 4th Street Bridge. I'm thinking even bigger than that. There's a lot of really nice artwork on the infrastructure on the freeways in Phoenix and Tucson. A lot of great cultural elements to it. It'd be nice if we could get that far with this project as well. This is the time when we can ask for the moon and see how far we get with it. So thank you. I'll continue to beat that drum.
Mr. Chairman, I think I've got just a couple more.
Okay, I
grants.
had a question. Based on the questions asked about construction administration, what happens like if MetroPlan applies and takes on that responsibility? How is that different than previous projects we've done where MetroPlan helps apply for funding?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the difference is this would be a multi-million-dollar capital project, and the MetroPlan receives grants, and we do planning generally. In some cases, we receive funding for planning and then passed it through. And an example I'll use is the downtown mile. We passed through $490,000 to the city for them to lead that project. But I think my point is, if we were to get a, say, $25 million capital construction grant, and if MetroPlan were to build it, that would be a significant shift in our
Gotcha.
identity and role as an organization. It could be done, but it's not something that, I would suggest we do lightly.
Okay, thank you. I just curious because I kind of had always assumed that it would go through City of Flagstaff and that MetroPlan wouldn't do the capital construction. So raising it in that way, just a different angle, is something I hadn't thought about. So thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes my report.
All right, well, thank you. Our next item is the Title VI training and presentation.
Okay, Mr.
thank you.
Chairman, I would like to introduce Sarah Martinez, who is here with ADOT Civil Rights Division. Every year, the board and staff need to have a Title VI training, and Sarah is here today to provide that to us. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let me see, just 1 second. Go ahead and share my screen. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Sarah Martinez, and I am a civil rights specialist here at ADOT Civil Rights Office. I am Jesse Zaragoza, my manager, was not able to join us today, but I'll go ahead and do the presentation. Now, since we know that MetroPlan is working on filling the Title VI coordinator position, we also added a few slides about the role of the Title VI coordinator for any future Title VI coordinators. So first, we're going to start with some non-discrimination regulations. The two in the left are laws. So we have the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which states that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Then we have the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987, which states that Title VI shall be applied institution-wide, and it is not limited to federally funded programs. So since ADOT receives federal funds and passes funds to MetroPlan, both agencies are required to be compliant with Title VI. And in the right side, we have two executive orders. So we have Executive Order 13166, and this one covers the limited English proficiency. And so a limited English proficiency person is an individual who has limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. And this executive order states that people who are LEP should have meaningful access to federally conducted and federally funded programs and activities. So this is why we are required to have materials available in other languages. Then we have the Executive Order 12898, and this one covers environmental justice. And the goal of this executive order is to avoid, minimize, or mitigate disproportionately high and adverse human health and environmental effects, including interrelated social and economic effects on minority populations and low-income populations. Does anyone have any questions about this non-discrimination regulation so far? No? Okay. So next we're going to talk about what Title VI ensures. And so Title VI ensures that recipients may not deny a service or benefit on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, or provide a service or benefit that is different from that is provided to others, and restrict an individual in the enjoyment of any advantage or privilege enjoyed by others. So there's that. These are the regulations. And now I would like to share just a couple of facts of the Arizona demographic profile. So I think the main takeaways is that the number of Arizonans without internet is slightly lower than the entirety of the United States. And 27.2% of the Arizona population speak a language other than English at home. 20.3% of the Arizona population speaks Spanish at home, and then 13.5% of the Arizona population is in poverty. And so this is significant because these are the needs of the people that we serve. So when you prepare for virtual public meetings, always keep in mind that 12.6% of the Arizona population does not have access to the internet. So incorporating a phone number for them to participate in meetings would be sufficient to show that there are efforts to include low-income individuals. So overall, understanding your community through demographics can help you develop meaningful community outreach strategies. Does anyone have any questions about the Arizona demographic profile so far? No? Okay. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. And so the ADOT Civil Rights Office conducts compliance oversight over the Title VI programs for FHWA and FDA subrecipients through various methods. We have the Title VI implementation plan that Jeff mentioned earlier that is due every year on August 1st. That one along with the goals and accomplishment report. Then our office conducts on-site compliance reviews. We provide technical assistance at any time. And just like today, we conduct trainings as well. So first, we're going to cover the Title VI implementation plan. And so this is one key way that ADOT oversees Title VI compliance. And so before the Title VI implementation plan includes the standard operating procedures for the agency's Title VI program. It must be submitted annually to ADOT Civil Rights Office on August 1st. And ADOT offers preliminary reviews two months prior to the deadline. So before that August 1st date, agencies can submit their implementation plans for a preliminary review. However, be mindful that conditional approval will be granted and the agencies are still required to submit the plan on August 1st with a copy of the board meeting minutes. And then the Title VI implementation plan, the plans are intended to be public documents. They are meant to convey the operations of the Title VI program, be user-friendly and accessible to members of the public. So the documents that you submit are dynamic documents and they are always reflective of real processes. Therefore, if the implementation plan states that the Title VI coordinator conducts program area reviews every year, then that must occur. Next, I'm gonna show you the elements of the Title VI implementation plan. Now, because of time, I won't go into detail. However, there are 18 items that should be included in the Title VI implementation plan. You don't have to follow the order here. The main point is to show that there are 18. And for fiscal year 2023, Metro Plan already has a Title VI implementation plan in place. And these items are already addressed in that implementation plan, but as always, feel more than welcome to reach out to our office for further assistance. So we have the policy statement, the standard USDOT Title VI assurances, the non-discrimination notice to the public, dissemination of Title VI information, the demographic profile, organization and staffing, demographic maps, demographic data collection and analysis, and the limited English proficiency. And then for the second half, we have the public participation plan, environmental justice, complaint procedures, include FHWA and FDA for COG and MPOs, and FHWA for certification acceptance agencies. Then we have compliance and enforcement procedures, program area review procedures, subrecipient review procedures, training, committee membership, and executive board review approval. The last two items are for COGS and MPOs only. Does anyone have any questions about the Title VI plan? No? Okay. So the next report would be the goals and accomplishment report. We also call it the annual report. This document has to show all the progress towards compliance with Title VI. So include accomplishments the agency has achieved in the area of Title VI, such as program area reviews, training, and processing of Title VI complaints, and include also the goals for the upcoming year in relation to the Title VI program. This document must be submitted annually to the ADOT Civil Rights Office on August 1st. And then we have on-site compliance reviews. So ADOT Civil Rights Office will visit the agency to review its FHWA funded projects and programs and how the Title VI processes listed in the implementation plan are working in practice. These on-site reviews, they do not take place annually. These are determined by conducting a high-low risk assessment, which considers factors such as the date of the last on-site review, any complaints that were received, and deficiencies found in the initial review of the Title VI implementation plan and the goals and accomplishment report. And then we have technical assistance and training. So the ADOT Civil Rights Office provides assistance to the agency on Title VI subject matters at all times. So we always say subrecipients are more than welcome to reach out if you have any questions or if you need any assistance. And then we also provide training. We have the annual FHWA Title VI training that is given by ADOT Civil Rights Office. Our next training will take place in summer of this year. And we will let everyone know the date of that training. And then here we included a slide on the role of the Title VI coordinator. Also, recipients should have a Title VI coordinator. The coordinator is responsible for being knowledgeable of the processes in the agency's Title VI implementation plan and ensure the implementation of the Title VI processes are being followed within the agency. Now, this does not mean that the coordinator is the only person completing these processes, but rather that the coordinator has a method of ensuring that the process is being completed. And part of the plan is compliance and enforcement. So although the coordinator does not need to complete everything on their own, they do need to be able to ensure that these processes are happening. So if there are any processes that the coordinator is not sure about, they can always refer to the implementation plan for guidance, or they can contact our office and we can assist them. Now for the next slide, as we continue to work in virtual spaces, it is important that we consider LEP individuals, minorities, and low-income individuals and the virtual public involvement process. So here are some things that we like to consider for virtual public meetings. Say, for example, before the public meeting, how is the agency disseminating the information, the Title VI information to environmental justice and LEP individuals? And then during the public meeting, the agency should be considering how they are disseminating Title VI non-discrimination notice to the public during the public meeting, and how is demographic data collected. Then following the public meeting, the agency should conduct a demographic data analysis just to see how LEP and EJ efforts are reflected and what program area reviews have been conducted on the public involvement process. And then do we have any questions about the role of the Title VI coordinator or virtual public involvement practices? No, okay. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Title VI complaints. So for MetroPlan, just like as always, make sure to notify the ADOT Civil Rights Office of any complaints within 72 hours of receiving the complaint. Now we're going to focus on the graph on the right side, since we have MetroPlan. It's a metropolitan planning organization. So if MetroPlan receives a complaint, if the Title VI complaint is related to an FDA funded program, service, or activity, investigate the FDA complaint following your agency's procedures. And these are listed in the Title VI implementation plan. Now, if a Title VI complaint is related to an FHWA funded program, service, or activity, do not investigate the Title VI complaint, forward the complaint to FHWA, and they will conduct investigation. Now, do I have any questions about Title VI complaints? No? Okay, so again, this is the last slide. I just want to open the room for any questions. Here at ADOT, we always have a tradition of putting our pets in the question slide. So that's my hedgehog with his Halloween costume. Does anyone have any questions? No questions. Okay, well, that's it for the presentation. Here I have our contact information. That is our main phone number and our email address if you have any questions. Again, we always believe that, we should have a partnership. So if MetroPlan ever needs any assistance, please feel more than welcome to reach out. Once you find a Title VI coordinator, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to train them in more detail about the items in the presentation. If I'm not available, you can always reach out to Jesse Zaragoza. He's a Title VI program manager, and then we have Crystal Smith. She's a civil rights compliance manager. And I'll make sure to share the slides with you for future reference as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate the presentation. Are there any questions? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to next item of business, Stride Forward Regional and Transportation Plan updates. David Wessel.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
It's not slide you yet.
Okay. There. Okay. Thank you. We are discussing Stride Forward, our regional transportation plan. Just before we dig too deep into this, a little bit of background on regional transportation plans. It really is the core product that metropolitan planning organizations like ourselves are required to do. We do this on a 5-year basis. Our last plan was done in 2017. That was the Blueprint 2040. These plans can be influential. Blueprint 2040 and a predecessor were both the basis for the transportation tax questions that were put to voters in 2000 and 2018. And so they provide funding, important funding for multimodal transportation, both directly and as a source of match for grants. The action we're looking for today on Stride Forward is to adopt 2 pieces of the plan, our policies and public involvement report. The presentation I'm about to give is one you saw last month, but it is pertinent to today and I think also relevant for our new member. So as a, address the. Okay, thank you. As background, you can see on the left in this diagram where we had the regional plan, we did Blueprint 2040. That led to the propositions 419 and 420. It also, that did pass. Proposition 421 on transit did not. But the plan itself was instrumental in seeing those propositions developed and put before the voters. And there was now we're at another important decision point. One important element or requirement of our transportation plans is that they be fiscally constrained. And so in Stride Forward, we have that we're developing, and that's called our Onward 2045 plan. But as part of this effort, there were many changes that occurred since 2017. And an important one of those was the adoption of the carbon neutrality plan by the city. And so we wanted to work with our partner and explore what it would take to implement the transportation aspects of that carbon neutrality plan. And that is our upward concept. And you can see it aligns with the timeline from the carbon neutrality plan for 2030. And so that's going to require new plans, new policies, and new funding. To look at those a little bit deeper, we project forward to 2045 population and jobs, and we're going to see increases between 20 and 30% there. The Onward plan really maintains status quo. In terms of fiscal constraint, we have to, we're assuming 419 projects, Proposition 419 projects, and the 420 project, Golden Tree Overpass, the current transit funding as it is. So that's staying within available budget and using the current land use plans from the adopted Flagstaff regional plan. When we do the analysis on that, we see about an increase in VMT by about 460,000 miles per day over 2019. And that is the goal, maintaining VMT or vehicle miles of travel at 2019 levels. So in order to ratchet that back and maintain those levels, we developed the upward concept and the target of 2.4 million miles per day. We achieved that through several means. One is shifting plans for where people live and work, our land use plans. And we'll explore that a little bit further. Increasing investments in bicycling, walking, and transit. And important to note, there is no limit to the funding in this concept. And the funding is fairly dramatic, and we'll see that here too. So how did these different strategies work? In terms of community design, where we live and work, that reduces VMT by about 85,000 miles per day. Relatively small impact, but when you look at a 20 to 30% growth to 2045, and bring that back to 2030, we're talking about, 10% or less in terms of growth, and compared to the rest of the community that exists today, it really doesn't move the needle that much. So increasing investments in transit, bicycle, and walking was fairly impactful, 183,000 miles. And then the other strategy is travel demand management, working from home, incentives and disincentives to really work on changing travel modes. And we've looked at practices across the country and their effectiveness. And this is our estimate of reducing miles by 207,000 miles per day. And you can see that reaches that target or exceeds the target. So when we look at where we concentrate growth, we looked at several different scenarios. The one we have here is the one we landed on as being most effective, and that's to concentrate 50% of new jobs and residences into the downtown and the 4th Street areas as indicated on the map. This, by putting people and their living and working environments closer together, that shortens trips. The shorter trips equals less vehicle miles traveled. And it also makes it easier to walk or bike or even take transit. And again, that lowers our VMT. In order to affect these changes, we really need to change the way we do business. And so we need new policies, and we need more money and change how we spend it. As far as the money is concerned, as I mentioned earlier, it's fairly dramatic. We've estimated we need to double transit service. So that's really frequency and coverage. That's about $25 million per year out to 2030. Again, our time is short in order to meet the carbon neutrality goals. So that's up from $12.5 million a day. We need to quadruple bike and pedestrian facilities. And so that's a lot of capital investment. That's a one-time expenditure, if you will. And we're estimating that at about $53 million per year by 2030. Travel demand management, on the other hand, seems like a bargain at $160,000 per year. There's a check mark there because MetroPlan has received some formula funds, the CRP, not congestion reduction, carbon reduction. Thank you. It's like lost track of that acronym there. Carbon reduction program funds of about $160,000 per year, and we're advertising for a travel demand management coordinator or planner as we speak. There will be funds above and beyond that salary that can be used for programming and marketing. There will also be costs associated with the community design elements, but those are undetermined. They may be incentives to focus development in those target areas, for example. So we estimated tax increase needed to raise these funds. You can see where we are today at about 0.94 upward. They're highlighted in yellow. There was some adjustments made since the last presentation. We'll add another 2.6 cents. And then the total is 3.5. So we're almost quadrupling our tax in order to make these transportation investments. We do expect our analysis took place at the regional level. The city, the carbon neutrality plan applies to the city, so we do expect some reduction in these demands as a result of that smaller geographic footprint. And there would also be some offsets for grants and developer investments that would bring these costs down, but this is just to give you a sense of what that level of investment means. As far as the policies, all of the policies are undergirded by the principles of equity and sustainability. So it's nice having the Title VI presentation ahead of this. And the policies, we really group those into three categories: funding, transportation, and community design. If I read these here, you can see them for yourself. These are the overarching policies. And then there are policies underneath these. To give you an example, so the onward policies are really a kind of a unification and summation of the policies in our existing plans. The Blueprint 2040, the Flagstaff Regional Plan, which includes part of the county, the Active Transportation Master Plan and Carbon Neutrality Plan. In order to achieve the upward concept, those policies really need to be amplified and targeted. And just going to give you some of the examples. There are about 50 policies overall, but to give you an example of some of those in each of these three large categories, those are highlighted here. So you can see, the first one, doubling transit service, the quadrupling of pedestrian bicycle infrastructure, promoting and incentivizing more and taller buildings. So those are some of the funding priorities that we need to consider. As far as community design, there's that aspect of more and taller buildings, and particularly in downtown and 4th Street, developing 15-minute neighborhoods that allow walking and biking, and developing urban areas with streets with small blocks that are which are more conducive for walking, biking, and access to transit. For transportation, really diminishing priority for single occupancy vehicles in a complete street environment. Looking at bus rapid transit or high frequency transit service in more areas, and this 15-minute connectivity as we look to develop and redevelop and retrofit existing neighborhoods. So I'm going to pause there. We're looking, as I said, we're looking for adoption of the policies today, as well as this public involvement, and we'll look at that in one motion at the end of the meeting. But I do want to pause there and see if there's any questions about the overall process or the policies before we get into public involvement. Okay, hearing none, would like to review the public involvement report. We set out to have a robust public involvement process, and some time ago we presented an update to the board and had your concurrence that in fact we were meeting that expectation of having a robust public involvement. You can see a list of all the activities we've been through here. I'll add again, since we just had our Title VI presentation, that we did go out in the field and both in person and having our surveys available at community centers and libraries so that they weren't all online. I believe the telephone survey offered Spanish if needed. And then our stakeholder group also includes several kind of Title VI representative organizations, some of whom we've met with. The policy language that we just gave an overview was not specifically tested in our public engagement process, but it was influenced by what we learned there. The costs have been, that again were presented earlier, were only presented to people not surveyed. And I think also importantly, our telephone survey was the only statistically valid survey that we did. We did make efforts to ask similar demographic questions in our online survey and ask one or two kind of bellwether questions to compare back to the statistically valid survey. And what we found were typically online survey participants were wealthier, had more education, and were more likely to ride bikes. That said, the information that we received was generally consistent across all of our sources and generally support findings in the telephone survey. As far as a lot of what we set out to do in our outreach strategy was to gauge public perception and attitudes towards many of the upward policies. And really, this will be useful to you all as decision makers. We hope it will be useful for you as you seek to develop and implement policies related to carbon neutrality and other things. So generally, we see social, economic, environmental aspects of sustainability being supported. The equity question was raised by several stakeholder groups, and we did receive several comments. There were some differences in some of the income groups in terms of their perspective on mobility needs, as well as some minority perspectives and those 65 years and older. You can see those here. As we engaged with stakeholders, and again, we had about 250 stakeholders representing either individuals or groups. Many saw that VMT reduction strategies could be good for physical and mental health and good for social connections. As far as the economy, many stakeholders saw positive impacts from the VMT reduction strategies. I will make a footnote here that when we met early in the process with the Chamber of Commerce, they have concerns about VMT reduction and actually see VMT growth as positive for the economy. When we, questions related to funding, we did not have many of those directly asking about willingness to pay or cost. But we do see much of the public see investment lacking in transportation, pedestrian, bicycle investments, and some of those translate to safety concerns. We did see trade-offs. One question asked about willingness to basically slow down in order to make biking and walking more safe. And large majorities of people said they would be willing to make significant, time trade-offs for that. One question we did ask, and this was actually discussed a little bit at the Transit Advisory Committee this morning, relative to their Flagstaff in Motion plan, that we did ask if people would be willing to pay for transit service to county communities. We've heard a lot about the lack of connections, both by transit and bicycle, to places like Belmont and Dolly Park and Kachina Village. And people were willing to pay modest amounts for transit service. And that was true for both city residents as well as county residents. In terms of transportation, we saw a lot of interest for switching modes. And I'll state that these are stated preferences, which people are always willing to be more optimistic than perhaps what would be a revealed preference where we actually see changes in behavior. But a lot of willingness to and interest in shifting modes away from single occupancy vehicles. General satisfaction with roads and streets, but importantly, and to the early reference, general dissatisfaction more neutrality about the condition of our pedestrian, bicycle, and transit systems. A lot of concerns about year-round use for bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And so I think a reasonable inference is that if we're going to be successful, we do need to manage those for year-round use. There's a comment about the chamber. In order to achieve this big shift, many existing neighborhoods will need to be retrofitted. They're essentially large cul-de-sacs that you drive into. And if you chose to walk or bike, you really don't have any options out of. And I think anytime you talk about that kind of change, some of it will be welcome, but I think there will be some opposition. As mentioned earlier, land use changes are going to be harder to affect. They're going to take longer time. Transportation funding or transportation investments will have more of an immediate impact. Community design, a lot of support for walkable neighborhoods. That said, at least in terms of today's environment, 40% consider distances too far to walk or ride. So that transformation of our neighborhoods from both land use and transportation system needs to happen in order to make the big shift occur. People recognize the need of and importance of multifamily housing to meet affordable housing needs. But the larger buildings, 5, 6, and even 3, 4 stories are seen as a possible source of nuisance traffic and are less safe. But as we get down in scale to 2 and 3 story apartments and triplexes, not a majority, but a significant number of people felt they could be retrofitted. My professional take on this is that we really need to focus on good neighborhood planning to integrate things like that next bullet, parks, access to transit, and demonstrate the quality of neighborhoods that can be built. And this takes us to our schedule. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions about the public involvement report.
Can I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Please do, Councilmember.
I think that we're going to find, if we want to say double the amount of taxation that goes to buses, just as an example, that's not a slam dunk. That's going to take quite a big effort. So I do appreciate that, this upward plan lays out what we really need to do, but then we're going to have to see how far the public is willing to go. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to the point that Councilmember McCarthy just made?
Sure, please do.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the question, Councilmember, the point really, and the presentation that Dave just provided. And I just want to, I guess, reiterate and remind that when we did the upward scenario, it wasn't to do a fiscally constrained plan. That's what the onward scenario is. The upward scenario is to say, what's it going to take to actually meet these carbon neutrality goals? And I think Councilmember McCarthy's point is well taken. Doubling the transit system is by no means an easy thing to do. And the other items are equally or more even ambitious. So I just want you to know that as staff, we know that. And our point here is trying to solve the problem, even if the solution might not be something that we think the community is going to be able to afford. We at least want to be able to say, if you want to do it, here's how it could be done.
Yeah, good points, Miles, and I agree with all that. And I do, again, I think that's why it's good we're doing the onward and the upward. So thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question. On this chart that we show here, it says that 90% of the financial plan is done. What's left with that to be completed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So we're meeting with the city next week, since we want to double check some of our cost assumptions and revenue assumptions with them before we roll that out. We've had a lot of work done and we just kind of dotting i's and crossing t's, whatever the mathematical financial correlation to that is. Then we were hoping to have that rolled out this month, but you can see it highlighted. We'll bring that to you next month and get that to you in advance of your meeting.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just want to add to, what Dave said and agree with everything. The point I would say is we have our data, but before we just put it in a plan and say, we'd like you all to adopt it, even more than going to the technical advisory committee to share it, we're going deeper into the organizations to confirm that the data and the conclusions that we are drawing are consistent with what they believe to be true, so that we're sure that we're in alignment with our member agencies.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions on the Strive Forward plan?
Mr. Chair, as you see on the calendar here, our approach here is to roll this out to you in pieces to lighten the load for the review. You can see the schedule in front of you. Next month, we'll be back with that financial plan, the electric vehicle plan, and part of our travel demand management strategy, which is a mobile application or mobile app plan. You can see these, I don't think I have it on here, but the asterisks are areas that are in our Metro Plan strategic work plan. And then in March, we'll come back with really the bulk of the plan. And we'll put it out to the public and then come back to you in April for adoption of the plan in entirety. So what we're looking for today is approval of the onward and upward policies, as well as the public involvement report. Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Just moving location to minimize background noise. So, okay, thank you. Is there anything else about the Strive Forward? Or are we ready to move on?
Mr. Chairman, we're looking for action at this point, looking for the board. I'll put the recommendation up on the screen.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm looking for my tech.
So it looks like recommendation, staff recommends the board adopts the draft RTP policies and public involvement report. Can I get a motion? Or any discussion if there's some discussion to be had?
So moved, Jim McCarthy.
Okay, can I have a second, please?
I will second Member Williams.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing the next pieces of the plan as they come forward. Thank you, Dave. Okay, next up is the Greater Arizona Funding Initiative update. Miles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to scroll down here to that item in your packet, in case you just want to review as I go along, as I go through the staff report. First of all, I want to point out that Kevin Adam the executive director of the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council. He was going to try to attend today. He's doing a lot of work on this effort. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. This is an item that I shared with the group, with the board last month. The board actually adopted the projects that we were going to be pursuing. And I'm going to go through it briefly, and then I can always meet with Councilmember Sweet at a later date if you want to go deeper into it. But essentially, a reminder for everyone, the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, it represents 11 small councils of government and NPOs around the state. And Kevin Adam runs the organization. We are a member, MetroPlan is a member of the organization. And Supervisor Vasquez is actually serving on the RTAC board, representing MetroPlan. And a year ago, RTAC went forward with a statewide funding initiative and asked for $50 million. That would have brought $2.6 million to Flagstaff. And it's a direct request to the state legislature to give us a special budget appropriation to send state funding directly to us. It's not a federal grant. And that was not supported. Funding did not happen last year. This year, RTAC is going back and is still fine tuning things. And it looks like they are going to be requesting essentially 6 times the amount they did last year. So 300 million. And that means 6 times the amount that would come to the Flagstaff area. And I'm just putting up on the screen the bullet point summary of the projects that we are asking for funding for. The Lone Tree Corridor at 2.6 million. Flood mitigation at the city of Flagstaff for 3 million. Flood mitigation for Coconino County, 5 million. And then I mentioned earlier the John Wesley Powell Bridge at I-17. Apologize if that says I-40 still, it's a typo I need to correct. For 5 million. So that would be our total request. This is definitely a heavy lift. That's why we're all going together around the state to ask for this funding. The good thing about it, I will say, is we're all working together with kind of one message. There's something in it for everybody. We can work with all of our members of our state legislature from around the state. I think that's all really positive structure. And we are also free as MetroPlan to make our own independent requests of the state legislature. So it's not like if we sign on to this, this is all we can do. So overall, I think it's a good project. I appreciate that the board adopted this approach last month. And the last thing I'll say is in your packet, there is an attachment, and I'm just scrolling through them quickly here. But the 4 projects each have a 1-pager that describes what the projects are, what the costs are. And I want to recognize Mandia Gonzalez, who put those 1-pagers together for us. And they're being compiled with everything else from around the state, and the request is being put into action. And with that, I just want to see if I want to recognize again, Supervisor Vasquez is serving on the RTAC board. Is there anything you want to add that I may have missed, Supervisor?
No, except for I thought it wasn't official yet and you were going to bring it to this body to vote on it this month. I mean, if we don't have to, I'm okay with that, but I thought that we still needed to go through that process for RTAC.
Sure, if I'm understanding your point, your question. I asked the board last month to approve these projects so that we're ready to go. So we have all these projects, the board, our community has said, if RTAC goes forward, this is what we want you to pursue. Now it's still an independent RTAC decision if they're gonna go for 300 million or 250 million or whatever they might choose. Does that?
That's not what no, that's not what I was asking. What I was
Okay.
saying was last month when we had the discussion of me taking over from alternate to the RTAC representative,
Oh,
we had discussed about you bringing it to this body this month and voting on it. And so I'm just asking, do we still need to vote on it or is it a done deal? Because you're reporting it as it's a done deal, but I thought we still had to vote on it. And if I missed something, please correct me. I'm just stating from what I remember from the last meeting.
No, you didn't miss something, I did, and I should have put this on the agenda as a separate item, voting for the RTAC seat, so I'll put it on next month, I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Just as you were talking about it and it shared it, it kind of triggered some a memory. So we'll get it right next month. So until then, I'm still alternate, but since we have no primary, then I guess I'm still filling in.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Let me see where we're at. And okay. All right, so next would be items from the Metro Plan staff. So Miles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I just want to again recognize and welcome Sandra Towell as our newest transportation planner. And I want to also let you know from a staffing perspective that our business manager resigned last month. So I am going to be filling that position. We're currently without a business manager. It'll probably take a couple months to fill that position and I'll keep you posted.
Great, thank you. Next, future agenda items. So I think the vote on RTAC representative would be one thing to put on the agenda. Is there any other items we need to discuss?
I just indicated two that are upcoming there. You asked for the Milton Road 180 corridor to be brought back and ADOT, and we will be bringing ADOT performance measures.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there any discussion or any comments from anyone regarding the agenda? No? Okay, well, thank you. Looks like we're now to closing business. Items from the board. Are there any general announcements, areas of concern, or would like to report on certain topics of interest to the board? No, sounds like everybody's good. I would just say from our front, from Coconino County, we're really excited about the federal funding that was approved in the omnibus budget at the end of the year. And we're going to be eligible for a total of $90 million from two different buckets, 50 million from NRCS and 40 million from Forest Service funding. We are in the process of looking how we're going to match that funding because it does come to a local match of close to $12 million. So we're looking at how we can identify that. If you're interested in hearing the full plan, our board meeting is on Wednesday, the 11th. They'll be presented by the Flood Control District, and then we will make a decision on how we're going to move forward to fund our match on January 24th. So, and we do have some positive developments with transportation in terms of the highway improvements. It sounds like a majority of the areas that we're looking for improvements will get some funding from ADOT. We're still working out the details. Once I have those details, I'll share it with you. Thank you. Aslan, you have your hand up.
Yes, Geronimo, thank you. I did remember something. I'm hoping Councilmember McCarthy, maybe you can tag team with me on this. It's a topic that came up at our Tuesday council meeting in Flagstaff. I don't know if it rises to the occasion of a whole future agenda item, but I do want to put on our radar wildlife corridors. And I'd like to have some more conversations about how we incorporate wildlife corridors into our planning, into our lobbying efforts, into our attempts to raise money and leverage funds. Some funding is attached specifically to that, I know, and partnerships with just thinking a little outside the box, I don't know how much MetroPlan is involved with US Game and Fish or Arizona Fish and Wildlife Department. But wildlife corridors, I don't think they get enough bandwidth in terms of our thinking and conversations, but they're incredibly important, especially as development continues throughout the region. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, or if it needs to be agendized, or just a general call to remember to incorporate those strategies in piecemeal, holistically into what we're doing. McCarthy, do you want to piggyback on that at all?
Well, I just want to say thank you for bringing that up. We did discuss it at Council Tuesday, and it's probably not a specific program, but it's something that we need to keep on the radar. It's so easy to just inadvertently destroy wildlife corridors if we're not aware. So I would think Arizona Game and Fish would be very interested in this. So maybe some kind of reach out to them would be of use. So thank you, Mr. Aslan.
Yes, thank you. Definitely an important topic, and I think we should definitely discuss it more, especially as we get the urban forest interface increases and we're developing those roads. David Wessel, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and council members, Aslan McCarthy. Knowing that this is not on the agenda now, I'll direct you to the Blueprint 2040. Our current plan, you can find that on our website. We did spend time talking with Game and Fish at that point and identified some mitigation strategies related to the various road projects we're recommending. And there are opportunities in some of the new grants that are have made wildlife corridors eligible. And so I think we can, we'll talk it over, but I think having that as an agenda item, we can make a brief presentation on.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Our next scheduled executive, excuse me, is there something else?
You're right there. I'm sorry I stepped on you. It's about the next meeting, the date.
No worries. Next scheduled executive board meeting, February 2nd, 2023 at 1 o'clock. Miles, would you like to expand on it?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, there is a conflict on February 2nd. City budget meetings are happening. And I'm going to be reaching out to everyone on the board, and I'll take feedback on it right now if it works or doesn't. But February 9th, just moving it out a week. I don't generally like moving, well, I hate moving meetings. But we need to at this time because there's a lot of business to be done and we can't afford to miss a month. So I'm going to shoot for February 9th and hope we can get a quorum for that meeting.
I just need to let everybody know that I will be in Washington, D.C. during that time. We do have a NACO legislative conference
wrapping up
during that
right now.
time. So I won't be available on the 9th.
I believe I can be there on the 9th.
I can
So
be
far, I
there.
can be there. Sorry. I can be there on the 9th so far.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tony Williams, and I will be able to be there on the 9th, only until 2 o'clock. I have a conflict at 2 p.m.
And I know that as far as Patrice
I'm good.
Horseman and our alternate Judy Begay, they both will also be in DC during that time on the 9th.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll work with you offline to try to find a shared time. I mean, we have a situation here, if we go with the 9th, where instead of having no board members from one member agency, we switch it, now we don't get any board members for another member agency, and we just chase our tail. So I want to make sure we schedule a time that everybody can attend. So you'll be hearing from us in the coming days. Thank you.
Great,
Sounds
thank you,
good.
appreciate it. All right, well, if there's nothing else, anybody have any other closing comments? words, concerns? All right, well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate, hope you had a great start to your 2023 year, and look forward to another year with MetroPlan. So with that said, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Supervisor. Safe travels, Jim.
Yeah.